this year where they're all set up in advance, and I can just click play and they just work.
Nice.
Oh, it's so much easier.
It's
still Google Hangouts.
Okay, so Hangout.
Yeah, but
with queue them up a little bit.
Yeah, you can queue them up easy. They tie into events now, and so you can. I like create a time and I just put it in for that time, and then it's advertised out on Google Plus. I think people could be watching us. I'm not sure if they are.
You don't
or
have
not.
to worry about that.
I don't. Yeah, you just hit, and I'm not worried about the live audience is so small. I don't worry about the live audience anymore at this.
More about the recording after the fact.
And then these become immediately available in sections. Before I was recording them all in one big.
And then cutting them
up.
And
then cutting them up. This is so easy. Go into each one, edit it. In fact, we'll edit this part out.
Yeah.
And so let me start. We're here at the Heartland Developers Conference, Omaha 2014. I'm here with Dustin Tauer, and we've had a good morning so far. Dustin, welcome. Good to see you again.
It's good to see you. It's been a couple months here.
I know. It hasn't been long.
Infotech, I think.
I think it was. And did we interview you were you here last year? Did we interview you?
Not at the Heartland Developer Conference. Okay. No, this is my first time here, actually.
Okay. So, well, welcome back. Good to see you. Talk a little bit about what you're talking about here at the conference. That's kind of the goal of these, is just to give kind of a summary overview. You don't have to give it all, but talk a little bit about why you're here and what you're talking about.
Well, yesterday I actually did a workshop on responsive web design, so that was a little bit more front-end HTML, CSS driven, and today is the more technical session on, its title is Front-End Developer Workflows, but I'm focusing on Node.js, which is a good platform for kind of creating your automation processes and making that front-end development process a little bit more streamlined for developers that are used to a very streamlined process on the back end.
Yeah, so, we talk about responsive. Give me a summary of where we're at today when we talk with PC numbers diminishing, and we still sell 1 million PCs a day. but they are diminishing. We've moved to some tablets, although that's slowing down too. Huge market in the phone. Responsive was kind of going to be every be-all, end-all. It was going to work. Is that working?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, when you look at the stats, desktop market penetration as far as the number of people who are acquiring desktop computers actually hasn't changed since 2007.
Okay.
So all those sales are people just getting
replacing
their computer, right?
The enterprise is full of PCs.
Absolutely. So we're not seeing any growth anymore with PC on the PC side. Mobile side, of course, is a different story, and Q3, Q4 of this year is where the transition is happening between web traffic being or mobile traffic on the web overtaking the desktop traffic. So we're actually going to, right now, starting to see more traffic on the web that's mobile than desktop. It's the first time in the history that it's been like that. So there's obviously a huge need for our web presences to be mobile oriented and responsive. And the techniques that people use nowadays, it goes from either being a one solution site where they have a single site, it's going to work across all the platforms, or they try to do a hybrid solution where they've got a website, but they also have a mobile app or a mobile version of the site, and that's harder to maintain, and that's why responsive web design is really grown as it has, because people want a one-product solution.
But there's some problems with that still, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, where are we still struggling in responsive design as far as what's still not working that forces me into a native app?
Yeah, I think what it is capabilities in some cases. When people want to take advantage of high-end animation, they're trying to make games online, and you can do that now in a responsive fashion, but it's really difficult for that kind of interactivity.
And why is that?
It's just partially because you got to factor in all these different screen resolutions. You got to factor in where things are going. So responsive, while it can be done in an interactive and gaming side, it can be really difficult to maintain. The other things that really give people trouble is the way that they consume their services. If they're a service-oriented company, for example, like Google Maps, they've got a responsive website that you can actually go, but they have an app because the app just is more powerful. It's not built in JavaScript. It's built, in a native language for whatever platform they're targeting. And so, there's things that you can leverage that are more powerful on the devices still that the browser rendering maybe can't keep up with. But that really is changing now, and it's becoming less of an excuse to not do responsive. You really should be focusing on finding that solution where, if I'm on a website on my phone, I'm the consumer, I want to look at what I want to look at. I don't want you as a developer to decide, oh, you're on a phone, I'm just going to show you a couple of things from our site because we're not going to show you everything. And that's really what we want to change, because nowadays I view a lot of sites on my phone that I never did before because it's just handier, it's easier to get at.
Yeah, and as the end user, I don't really care if it's,
yeah.
you know, I just want to get to it, right?
Well, and there's another stat that just came out a couple months ago that 65% of mobile users download 0 apps per month. So literally no apps per month.
Yeah.
And you know, when I saw that, I kind of questioned it, but then I thought to myself, when I get a new phone, I download the Twitter app, I get all my productivity apps on there, and then I'm done.
Yeah.
I really don't download many apps because when I go to a news website and it prompts me to download their app, I cancel out of that and I try to find the content in the browser because that's where I want to be.
Yeah.
I don't want to be constantly jumping back and forth between apps and sites and apps and sites.
Right, right.
You know, especially when you're in an app, some kind of reader app, and it opens up the URLs in the browser, and then you got to like toggle back and forth between.
Well, and then Android asks you, hey, do you want to open this? And
you know, it's just not that seamless of a workflow, and we want that seamless workflow that that we're used to on the desktop and everywhere else. And really, the way that browsers have been updated now and support the technologies, the way we're phasing out older browsers, there really isn't an excuse not to be able to leverage technology.
Yeah, so like the native browsers, and I shouldn't say native, but yeah, so
the
native
big browsers.
The big browsers, so Chrome and Safari on Android or iPhone, IE on Windows Phone at this point. The progress is coming along, is what you're saying. So now the functionality inside of them is good enough. We talked about so one of the limitations in there is just maybe even accessing the hardware. But what about it seems like rich media. You talked about gaming. What about rich media? How are we making progress? Because as a podcaster, I'm worried about video and audio.
Video at work. Yep,
right?
Absolutely.
And video has always seemed to be the Achilles heel of mobile.
Well, it is, and you know the video is kind of one of those topics on the web. There's a lot of factors that contribute to the video quality and the way the video is going to play. I mean, you have the basic ones like bandwidth. You know, if you're on a slow connection, it doesn't matter if you're on a laptop or a phone or anywhere else, you're not going to view the video. But how you deploy the video is really the game changer in there. You know, a lot of companies that want to put videos up on their site, you know, I tell them just host them on YouTube and embed them on your page, because YouTube's got the backbone on their server to be able to support the traffic that might be viewing it. They also do dynamic streaming, where they're going to give you a lower quality version of the video if you're on a slower connection. Again, they don't care if you're a phone or a tablet or what. If you're not on a fast connection, they're going to try to give you an optimized version of the video. But you know, outside of that, then you still have things like memory and RAM and stuff on devices that, you know, as we're playing media, can contribute to that experience. And you know, most of the mobile platforms have done a really good job of when a video is playing, it actually is playing not so much embedded and interpreted by the page, but actually off the hardware itself. So, you know, on an iPhone, when you click a video, it kind of launches full screen, and it's really playing in its own little video viewer. But as soon as you close it, you're back on the web page. They're trying to bridge those gaps between performance, you know, and then hopefully the bandwidth side kind of massages itself out.
Yeah, and actually, I think the best example of that today is Facebook. They in their app, now it's an app, it's not responsive, but in their app, it's a real smooth. I mean, even to those preview videos are playing
the little
very
clips that they play
through. You hover over and then they'll play for you. Sound turned off. They're doing, whatever they're doing, it's great. I mean, I think that's a great user experience.
Yeah, and it's those kinds of things that, you know, change the way that we consume video and establish kind of new paradigms in how we want to view it. Because I think that's the other key to responsive web design is, you know, I kind of stressed in my topic yesterday that, you know, it's not about taking your full site right now and squishing it down onto a smaller screen, because there are things that aren't as usable on that size screen, whether it's navigation, whether it's the kind of interactivity you have on your site, if it's drag and drop. The classic example for me is a Google map being embedded on a site. You know, greatly usable thing on a regular website where you can go to a contact us page, see the Google map, drag it around, zoom in and zoom out. But in a responsive site, oftentimes the Google map is taking up the full width of the view of your screen. And as you're scrolling down, the second you get to the map, you actually start scrolling the map, and you can't scroll the page anymore unless you grab a part outside of the map and scroll it. And so that's an example of, even though the Google Map can be responsive and look good on a mobile phone, swapping it out with a static image that people can click on to launch the map or something might be more usable. And the same thing with those video previews on mobile. Rather than have to click a video, start playing the whole thing from the beginning, having this sort of animated GIF style pre-roll that's really low bandwidth and just kind of giving you a glimpse of what the video is all about keeps you from having to wait for it to start streaming. And you can, I don't really want to watch that. You can scroll through it and move on.
Sometimes I've watched the whole thing, like with no sound, and I'm like, oh, good enough. And then you just you don't even evoke the player.
It's a clip, or it lets you decide how you want to consume that content. And that is responsive design. Even though it's an app, it's still a really great responsive technique to say, all right, at this platform, at this level, this is the way we're going to allow the user to experience that they can still tap on it, play it the regular way, but we're going to give them some other alternatives here.
Yeah. Well, you brought up, you made a statement about going to YouTube, and when I first started podcasting, I had that same thought. I was like, I'm not going to create a brand new RSS. I'm not going to do this. It's just go to YouTube. And I've actually, so my listeners changed my mind. I got some feedback from a few of them. They're like, we'd like to be able to download your video.
Yeah. Yep.
And so for whatever reason, in that environment, it's not either or. We still provide it via YouTube if you want to watch it there. But I put out RSS feeds, and immediately I'm getting, let's just say 50 or so downloads already. The feeds are brand new, and I'm getting already a bunch of hits. It just goes to, we're in a transition period, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and that's kind of the way, that's the way people kind of get into handling our, increasingly mobile audience, is figuring out what's the best way to deliver my content and the way that my consumers want to see it. And providing that for them, and like the RSS feed that you're doing, RSS feeds have been around forever.
I know,
right?
Since the beginning of time.
And the great thing about it is you just put a different skin on top of it. You just kind of consume the content. You just say, hey, all right, if you're on a desktop, you can plug this into whatever your reader is. If you're on mobile, great, you can still consume it. But what the user actually sees can be optimized. For platform.
And what was odd is I have users who wanted to watch the video large, so about 920. In that range, and they wanted to. I could go full 1080, but that's it's a little bit of an overkill for what they're doing. They're downloading it to the tablet because they're in a situation where they don't have connectivity, and so YouTube does not provide still yet a great offline player. That would be awesome if they allowed, but then
And that's really that's another one of the big things about the responsive movement that is a hurdle for companies that go to, like, for example, The Verge, the tech blog, kind of a spin-off of Engadget. Just a couple of days ago, they launched their new site. It actually looks the exact same as their previous redesign, but they rebuilt it to be completely responsive. They're getting rid of their mobile app. They're getting rid of their mobile website. They want one product for users to consume. Part of the hurdle, though, that comes with that is offline capabilities, and so those are the kind of things that companies do recognize, and sometimes the reason why they go toward a native app, because they can have something that runs without internet connection that synchronizes data back and forth. Now, with that being said, the web APIs that allow you to do the same kind of thing just in browser have offline websites that work without internet. If you've ever bookmarked a website on your phone, it saves down. It looks just like a regular app. Got an icon on your phone. When you launch that, it can actually be running in an offline mode. Those APIs vary a little bit browser to browser. That's why it's not a completely standardized solution yet. But that's what will replace apps, as that technology progresses. Where, when I pull up my website and I bookmark it, it will download everything I want, or every time I'm running it with the internet, it can be syncing data behind the scenes. I think
that's the key, right? Is that control over the sync of having some, like, when I want, and maybe even intelligent sync, right? Which is, how often am I accessing this, and then it's going to set some kind of rhythm that tries to predict, like, so, hey, do I need to go every hour, or I only check it once a day? So
how much history do you want to keep? All that kind of, and that's the nice thing about that is that's not a technique that is foreign, because mail apps do that all the time. Your note-taking apps, Dropbox, all these kind of apps have been doing this for years and years and years, and so the process of doing that isn't different. It's just applying that to the web and to websites that are going to run that way is where things have to go. And again, it's not every case. Sometimes you need to have internet to use certain sites and use certain features. So
Like the stock market.
Exactly.
Like sports scores.
Exactly. The stocks from yesterday aren't going to help you out at all, right?
A cash stock price is not going to help you.
Precisely.
So we talked a little bit about games. We talked some about video and let's say rich media content.
Mm-hmm.
What else? What are the stumbling points right now, or the roadblocks on responsive design?
The stumbling points is a perfect segue to what I'm going to do this afternoon with the workflows, and really back-end developers, .NET developers, Java developers for years have had great tooling. They're used to tooling, they're used to workflows that have been really well. And as we transition to front-end development, where it's not just making things look pretty on the web, there's a lot of JavaScript coding. Have front-end, back-end, and there's kind of this middle end that's emerged. That's kind of a little bit what my talk about Node is about. But it's trying to find workflows that simulate what you would do on the server, where you're automating your builds, where now your files are done, you're gathering them together and publishing them to a server, but publishing them in a compressed format, minifying your code, making it more optimized, because the sites that we're building nowadays are being used in low bandwidth situations or on devices or in other places. And so there isn't a lot of tooling out there to do that right now. A lot of the things that we use are actually command line solutions. It's kind of funny. It looks like a little like we're programming back in the 90s with some of the ways we're building things, but they're very sophisticated processes that we're using. And that's kind of the stumbling block for people as they move to the front-end development side, is our previous models of development still work, but they need to be modified a little bit so that we can actually create this content on the front end in an efficient manner.
Yeah, we jumped through a lot of hoops for low bandwidth or no bandwidth on the mobile device. We did a similar thing in the 90s, let's say in early 2000, where we couldn't guarantee broadband, and so we did a lot of that stuff. And then, of course, now it's almost assumed if it's going to be PC.
Yep, we're angry if we don't have fast Wi-Fi.
Exactly.
Right?
I know. I got here today and I was coming over Wi-Fi. I'm like, that's not going to work, and they wired me in, and I had 50 up and down. I'm like, oh, that's going to be plenty.
Yeah, but
right,
and they used to be impressive, but you're like, okay, yeah, that'll be fine.
Exactly. But are we going to get to that point with mobile, do you see, in the future, where it's less of a bandwidth discussion? Because certainly we're putting up more towers.
No, I think it's it is something that it's not far off to imagine a world where you're always connected. Right?
Does that change things for you, thinking-wise? Is like the things we do today, is 5 years from now, is some of those hoops we're jumping through now going to just be a foregone conclusion?
5 years from now, I'm not so sure, because I think right now a lot of what we're doing in the responsive realm, while it is sort of standardized, there is still a lot of disparity from team to team. You talk to one developer, they do it one way. You talk to another developer, they do it the other way. And they're all kind of the similar techniques. But so I think 5 years from now is a little conservative, or a little aggressive in us having a completely different mentality. But I think it is with the way that cloud computing works and the way that we're providing content to our users. The models are changing. We're still going to have some interface that the users are connecting with, some situations that we're not going to have internet connection, but I think that sort of online-offline presence is going to become more seamless. It's not really going to matter whether you're connected or not, because of the way that we're managing data and because of the way the applications work.
Sure.
We're connected so frequently that things are syncing without us knowing, and we're just always sort of up to date and living in a world where it's like that. So, like I just saw on Twitter today that I think it's GM announced their I forget what models or what cars. I just saw a quick headline that they going to have 4G Wi-Fi in all their cars that they're shipping. So like you're driving around in a 4G connection. Basically. I mean that's
SIM card. Put your SIM card in.
Problem driving between here and Omaha. I pretty much on the interstate have LTE the whole way. I don't have really many drop calls, but that didn't used to be the case. You're in the car and you didn't know if you were going to have your GPS working or not, because it's all data driven now. It's not downloaded ahead of time.
Well, and aren't cars a perfect example of off and online and being able to elegantly move between those two states, and for the end user not even know, right? I mean, absolutely. That's a perfect example of that.
That's the key there, is for the end user, they shouldn't know whether they're in an app, a website, wherever. It's supposed to be seamless.
Getting the information they need.
We want them to get the information they want.
In some intelligent way. You were talking about the workflow and anything else in there you want to highlight in that as far as what you're talking about?
It's going to be it's like I said, it's a new way of thinking or a new way of working for back-end developers. But it's funny, it's really not any different than what they're doing. The kind of automation that we're using is the same automation they're using in Studio or Eclipse or whatever tool that they're using. It's just a different platform to do it. So it's something that, when I first saw it, I was a little hesitant into, I don't really know if that's going to work, but now using Node and incorporating that into my workflows, it's really changed the way that I develop. And so I think it's kind of, as back-end developers move toward the front end, or any kind of developer is incorporating front-end workflows into what they do, keep an open mind about what you're using and really experiment, because the community has really grown around it. So there's a lot of help out there, and the efficiencies emerge pretty quickly through it.
What do you, for your customers, what are you telling them from a web server standpoint? They're building apps, they're building not apps, but they're building responsive sites. For you, where's the best place to go right now? What do you like as far as architecture, and there's this in-house versus moving it to the cloud? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it varies nowadays, there's very seldom do we come across companies that need a website, right? Or that don't have, so whether they're hosted on GoDaddy or Amazon or S3 or Media Temple or anything, the web host doesn't really matter as much, aside from high bandwidth sites that need to have
redundancy,
dedicated servers and that
absolutely.
kind of thing. So I tend to tell people, stay wherever you are if you're happy with the performance of the server, if you're happy with the traffic, if you're not having any downtime. If your server is having trouble, downline can't handle the bandwidth or the traffic that you have, that's the time to move.
On.
And it's always easier to move when you're doing a rebuild versus moving an existing site. So when you're getting to the point where you're going to start, okay, we're going to redo our site, we're going to make a responsive website. Well, don't just think from a design standpoint. What do we want it to look like? How do we want it to work? Think also from that infrastructure. Are you happy where you currently are? Are there problems with the web host that you're currently using? Because that's the time to change.
Right.
But web hosting is there's tons of them out there. Dime a dozen, but it just depends on what you're using.
What about the architecture though? On that, how is that changing, or what kind of recommendations when we talk about what they're running and the actual platforms?
The kind of cool thing about responsive design is, whether you're hosted on a Windows box doing .NET or your PHP farm, really the key to responsive web design is that it really doesn't know about your back end and what you're communicating with. So the buzzword nowadays is have APIs, right? So if you're a company that provides services to whether they're in-house or external, you don't know oftentimes where your data is going to be consumed. So you want services that spit out JSON data that you can consume, whether it's in a mobile app, whether it's in a redone responsive site with some sort of JavaScript app that you have running on there. That API, that kind of middle layer that's communicating from the front end to your architecture on the back end, is really the most important part, because that is the interchangeable part. That's the part that we want to drop in there so we can switch out our UI and make it look completely different, but we aren't affecting at all the back end, as opposed to, and this technique, it's, standard separation of your UI layer from your data layer. That's nothing new nowadays, but it's even more evident that we want to have that separation so that we can start incorporating what we're building or what we have built into different mediums and different views, different platforms.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just interviewed a company called Zapier. They're like if this then that. If you're familiar with them, same kind of company, and they're a company that lives on APIs. That's all they connect to one service layer and then make an automated connection between let's say Twitter and Facebook. Anytime something happens on Twitter, I want you to do this thing on Facebook, and they make these connections, all API driven.
Well, and that's the thing. That's the first thing I do when I'm on make a new account to something, or I scroll to the bottom to see if they have that little developers link. Click that developers link, and it's api.whatever.com. Like, perfect. Yes, there's API, so I can do what I want to do with this site versus use just what they have. And I think that is the power with anything, is being able to provide your data or your services in a lot of different mediums without having to re-architect the whole thing.
Yeah, or direct access to the data.
Which, if you have to re-architect the whole thing in that case, you probably built it wrong to begin with, and it should be re-architected.
Right, yeah. Hey, anything as we kind of come in for a landing here? Anything? Let me ask you a forward-facing future question. What are you excited about when you think about the next couple years? What are you seeing in technology? Not even necessarily related to what we're talking about here, but what are you excited about when it comes to technology?
I think I think the web is the most exciting thing in the way that because every day it's evolving in the way that we're able to work with services and consume our content wherever we want to consume. I think it's going to be interesting with the plethora of devices that are coming out. Now with Apple's rumored devices, which they are announcing shortly, but we still don't officially know what they are.
Very soon, right? In a couple days.
I think it's a couple days from now. So they used to always be really hard-nosed in their screen resolutions and what they're providing, and now there's going to be bigger phones and potentially bigger iPads, and we're becoming into a world where devices really don't matter. It doesn't matter what you're on, and it's kind of fun to see the development processes around that change to accommodate that, and to us stop having that discussion of like, okay, well, we need an app or we need a site. Well, let's build it so it works on the iPhone first, and then we'll move on. Well, Android is, I think iOS is 35% of the market, Android is 50% of the market,
right.
And so Android's the more popular platform.
But people buy on iPhones.
Exactly. The stat about zero apps a month being downloaded, it doesn't matter.
But nobody's downloading your apps.
Nobody's buying, except for those individual productivity. I mean, everything's software as a service nowadays anyway, right? $10 a month gets you this,
Yes.
But I think the exciting thing is how we're seeing traditional web presence merging with mobile development that really took off in the late 2000 or like 2009 2010 eras, and now we're kind of back to this agnostic little world of just build your content, get it up online, make it work right, and there isn't really right or wrong answers right now, but it's all about people coming up with the most creative solutions. Yeah.
Is the tablet going to make it in your mind? Is it going to be an intermediate device? Because it seems like a big rush to tablets, and now we're since phones have gotten so big.
Well, I'm biased because I'm a developer. I'm just not a home user, non-technical sort of. But my iPad, I watch videos on it. That's about it. Maybe catch up on Twitter while I'm laying in bed. Because it's a bigger screen than my phone. But I didn't even bring my iPad on this trip because I've got my laptop, I've got my phone, and tablets. At least certain tablets just aren't productive enough for me. They're not that much more productive than my phone. And their limitation between that and my laptop, it's so much easier for me to pop open my laptop and actually respond to what I need to respond to, or until I can actually develop really seamlessly on a tablet. For me, they're just kind of a toy. In what it is. And I mean, they have great applications in sales, people walking around a big box store with a tablet helping customers, like, those kinds of things where that becomes a really lightweight tool, point and shoot, checking in for different things. There's obviously business use cases where they make sense.
But you're not going to go out in the evening and carry your tablet.
No,
you're not going to.
Not at all.
It's just interesting that had its day, and now it's fading a little bit. We may see some new things come out that revive tablets.
And it's always kind of exciting to see what, because Apple for a long time has always been kind of pushing the envelope, for better or worse in some cases, and how we want and what we want, or knowing what we want before we want it, and so watching them to see if they're starting to recognize any shift in that, and now it's kind of, we've moved to that wearable realm where it's all about smart watches and this kind of thing. And until they start making wearables not look like you're in Star Trek or something, I'm kind of really not too into them.
It's still niche-y.
Yeah, the Google Glass thing. Every time I see one, I'm just kind of like, maybe someday I'll get used to it. I suppose it's the way that people thought about like clothing, and that kind.
No, I don't think it is. I think glass is interesting.
Like people wearing that. Oh, well, I guess that's cool. So maybe it'll take on. But there's, I really think like wearables should be not used, not noticed. Like they should be seamless.
Well, that's the problem with Bluetooth headsets, and
you're like
you don't want to see them. You don't want to, right? I mean, the geeks. It's a geek thing,
Yep.
right? So, you know what I find interesting? You were talking about both with Apple and with Microsoft. Both have CEOs or had CEOs that were very restrictive, and they both moved to two new CEOs, both Tim Cook and Satya Nadella.
Changed things very
that all of a sudden it's like we need to be everywhere.
Yep.
Android maybe being the opposite, where they're actually probably employing more standards than they ever have.
Well, and really, I think it's a product of at least in the Apple Android sort of realm of their history, where Android traditionally has been extremely fragmented. You know, there's lots of different operating systems in the wild, lots of different devices in the wild, whereas Apple traditionally was, you want to buy a laptop, you get two choices. You want to buy a desktop, you get one choice.
Right.
You want to buy a phone, we got one. You know, like it was a very tight ecosystem, and now that Apple has held on to that for a while and is branching out, Android at the same time has done a really great job of standardizing their platform and reeling in that fragmentation, making the latest version of Android, you know, the majority of the phones running that version. So it's really changed the way that, I think that's helped Android become as popular as it is now. I mean, it's funny to think, you know, that, I mean, even though the iPhone still technically is the most popular individual device, the Android platform is blowing iOS off the water.
Just in sheer numbers.
Yeah, just in numbers.
And who would have thought Samsung would have been as big of a player and as big of an influencer?
Fantastic job putting out. Well, they put out products that, you know, solve problems and you know, have really they've not just copied, but have, you know, bridged that gap.
Yeah, so they scratched the itch. Is what they did. Well, Dustin, thanks for taking a few minutes. It's always good to catch up with you. And, of course, all of Dustin's information will be available right below the video window here in the meta down below on YouTube. I'll get back with you and get whatever that information you want it to be. And you can contact him down below. Dustin, thanks again. Appreciate you watching.
Thank you very much.
Let's cut it off.